nights off to school and work, waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons, midnight sketch can't come too soon. Afternoon and sketch can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time you see for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape? Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.
Good evening, everybody, and if you are joining us from the Legacy stream on Pro's channel, I apologize for all of that nonsense, but hope that you had a good time. That actually was a great gesture from all of you who were there and donating towards that worthy cause. That's a family that does need some help, so thanks all of you for being there. Martin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well.
That is excellent news. You are my co-host for the night, as Kevin.
Sorry.
Oh no! Well, tell it to the
The
chat.
audience.
They're the ones who are disappointed. Yeah, we've still got Kevin out, although last that I spoke to him, he was on the mend. I don't know how long that he'll be out going forward, but he does thank all of you for your well wishes. We have been passing them on. Marvin is out tonight, so is Trish. But Martin had proposed here a couple of weeks ago what I thought would be an interesting thing to debate. And so we're taking that as our subject tonight, and that is whether George properly understands or articulates the concepts of both balance and redemption. Martin, I'll let you talk a little bit about it, because I have a feeling that you're going to frame this in an interesting way.
Oh, well, thank you. You may be giving me too much credit, but the redemption side of it really comes down to the special editions. Because in the original cut, Sebastian Shaw is the Force Ghost.
Yep.
But in the special editions, it's Hayden Christensen. And there are a lot of technical reasons why they would do that, but it completely destroys the idea of redemption for the saga, because redemption doesn't take away the things you've become. It reconciles you with something else and the man you are still.
Okay, so you now give me the framing point that I'm going to have to debate against, and that's going to be interesting, because that's not the angle I thought you were going to take.
Oh,
so that's
what did you think I was going to take?
Oh, it doesn't matter. I want to chew on this a little bit, because this is going to be interesting. It's also interesting because I'm having to argue somewhat against my own views, which is my favorite kind of debate. I love when I'm actually put in the position of having to figure out how am I going to argue this when I don't necessarily believe it. So that'll be fun once we get to there.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, what have you been up to this week? Anything fun?
Just a lot of getting out and meeting people. And tonight I went to the year-end elementary school pageant for my kids.
Oh, that
It
sounds
was
cool.
a nice, sweet sort of thing with some really loud world drumming and songs that I couldn't understand the high-pitched noises the children were making because it was in the gym of a local college.
That was one of the interesting things about becoming a parent, was that I remember when I was in school, I always wanted my parents to be there for the concerts and the things like that, and being in band, and I always looked for them in the stands and was always happy when they were able to make it, when they were there. And I always kind of wondered, why did they always seem less than enthusiastic? and then you become a parent and you get to go and see, especially young kids when they have not yet mastered their instrument. You go, oh, it's because this sounds like a car crash. So I get it, but I hope you had a good time.
Oh, I had a great time.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Have you been watching or reading anything interesting lately?
Well, I've gotten through several of the lesser Bantam trade, or the lesser Bantam paperbacks that came out in the 90s. I got through the Corellian trilogy.
Oh,
And
see,
I
I actually love that series. That's one that is kind of a guilty pleasure of mine.
Mhm. No, I don't have the problems with that one that I did with the Callista stuff,
Yep.
but, I each time with both Callista and Corellian, I realized, "Oh, I read these when they first came out." Uh, so I just listened to the abridged audio versions that were put out years ago, and with the Corellian ones, I thought, "Oh, that was probably a mistake. I probably should have actually read those again because the abridged stuff was a little too abridged. There were some subtleties that it left out. I was a little The Lando storyline was a little weird because, he's trying to get married, and he actually falls for a woman, and then
Tender Rasant.
woman, which I guess is very Lando, when I think about it. He's getting his own way.
What I love about the Corellian trilogy is it's I always like when Star Wars gets weird. And in the Corellian trilogy, they kind of casually reveal that the Corellian system is entirely constructed by some kind of an ancient, very powerful race. And later
Mhm.
they pin that on the Celestials. But at the time, they don't really explain it. You just know that Center Point Station is there and has some really weird machinery in it that
And then
is,
there's the repulsors inside the planets.
yeah, really powerful tractor beams on Center Point Station, and they believe that's how it was constructed, is they just basically dragged all of the moons into place. They introduced the Solonians and the Drawl, which are each different races on different planets in the system. It really deepened all of the lore around Corellia. Um, I loved it. Although, looking back on it now, I think the weak point is Thrackan Sal Solo. And
The
it's
overweight drunken Han Solo?
yeah, it's basically kind of the evil twin, but not. But
Yes.
but I it's this is one of those cases where in my head I never really saw him as overweight, but I was fan casting him as Sam Elliott because I thought he was similar enough to Harrison that I could buy that they would be related. So
Well,
I
but
always kind of go
it
ahead.
does describe him as, drinking too much and having more weight on him than Han does.
Yeah, I remember him drinking, and I remember him being volatile, and that was kind of why I had fun with Sam in the role in my head, because I could see him being an abusive kind of a guy. Because Sam, not that he's an abusive guy or that he plays those kinds of characters usually, but he is a guy who can be scary.
Yeah.
And I felt like Thrackan is the kind of guy who's volatile in the way that you don't want to see him when he's drinking and when something doesn't go his way.
Mhm.
Um, so I just got a soft spot for it. I loved the weirdness of Center Point Station, and the Corellian system and Center Point Station also play into lots of stories later.
Oh,
So
do they? Okay.
yeah, and also one of the things that I liked about this particular trilogy is it felt to me that we finally got to the place where the Solo kids were old enough that they actually felt like real distinct characters and not
Mhm.
just the caricatures that they had been up to that point.
Do you feel like there's a lot of power creep coming into these?
Bantam was famous for that.
Yeah, because, like, the Solo kids walk through a deflector shield and, all sorts of things like that towards the climax.
It's okay. So this gets a little weird in my head because I've got some cognitive dissonance when it comes to this stuff. Um, I love that in the Old Republic period, the Jedi and the Sith are wildly more powerful than anything that you see in what would be considered the original era.
Mhm.
Um, I also think that in Bantam, the power creep, especially with Kevin J. Anderson, got way off the scale. And it annoyed Timothy Zahn so much that he wrote a duology to address it.
I've
And
just started that, yeah.
and I kind of felt like that was also the wrong approach because while I agreed with pretty much everything that Timothy Zahn was saying, he was so upset about it that the hand of the author was really obvious. This is the author telling all of the other authors, knock it off. The power creep has gotten ridiculous. It's an edge. It's not godlike power, and so it kind of stole my enjoyment of those books because it was so transparently a correction. Um,
It's
so
funny because he uses Mara Jade to do that some.
and Mara Jade is also a character. See, I've never really gone into this a whole lot. Mara Jade annoys me. Um, because I sort of think that she's Zahn's Mary Sue. And I've always, I've kind of, I understand why they paired those characters together. I understand why they got married. I'm fine with all of that.
Well, yeah,
But,
because she's a hot redhead and it looks good in the comic books.
yeah, but Mara Jade always kind of annoyed me too. I love her backstory. I love the idea of her being the Emperor's hand and the secret agent for the Emperor and all of that stuff. But Zahn gets a little preachy with her too, especially towards Luke, and I felt like this is an issue.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, but don't you think also some of the things they were doing, like Kip Duran being so easily forgiven by Luke and the other Jedi?
Kip is
Yeah.
another character that I hated, and this goes back to Kevin Anderson. It's funny because I hated his books. I've except for Darksaber. Weirdly, I liked Darksaber because it was just so weird and off the wall that I could kind of go with it. But as it's like I like the way Kevin Anderson described the Spice Mines of Kessel. I actually liked
Hmm.
the early stuff in Jedi Search, but Kip annoyed me. As soon as you start talking about blobsticle races, I just want to throw the book into the corner. Um, the Han Solo treating Kip as like an adopted son and then going skiing. It's like, come on.
Yes.
It's so weird. And then you've got Admiral Dala, and it's I like the concept of the Maw installation, but yet another prototype Death Star.
Hmm.
And Dala is such a flat character.
And they
And
keep
you've
bringing her
also
back.
and you've also made her weirdly the mistress of Grand Moff Tarkin. It's like it's weird stuff, man. Um, so I feel like Anderson was a good idea guy when, especially when he was working with Tom Veitch on the comics. They created all kinds of concepts that I thought did a lot of great world building and lore and creating like holocrons came from
Hmm.
those guys. Nar
Yep.
Shaddaa came from those guys. Um, Practically all of the old Republic stuff came from the seeds that they planted in the Tales of the Jedi stuff. Korriban came from Dark Empire. You know, that was Tom Veitch and Cam Kennedy. Kevin Anderson wasn't involved with that. But so much of the stuff that we later did accept as bedrock EU canon
Hmm.
were seeds that they planted. I just felt that Kevin was awful on execution. So, um, my own personal critiques. Um, but the thing about Bantam is that, and this is when I talk about the EU, I'm always really careful about it because I feel like half of the EU stuff was good or great. Half of it was utter crap. And I think there's a lot of rose-colored glasses that comes out when we talk about the EU because you sort of it's like the ones you don't like you just don't talk about, you know.
Yeah.
Planet of Twilight for me is one of those things where it's like, what were you thinking? What in the world were any of you thinking with this novel? And I think that's why when they did go to Del Rey, they made a concerted effort to say we're going to get some good authors all together in a room and we're going to do arcs
Hmm.
that have real impact, but we're going to plan it out beforehand. That's what Disney needed to do. They actually needed to think about what is the arc of this thing instead of just trusting two guys to just randomly take each episode and make it work. You know, so uh, I got mixed feelings.
That makes all the sense in the world.
I think is it after the Corellian trilogy that they jumped to Del Rey? Is that the last one in the Bantam series, or
I don't know. I know that after Corellian trilogy comes the Thrawn duology.
okay?
But
I
at the same time, you've got the I'm doing this in chronological order.
Yep.
So there's the X-Wing novels that also are interspersed at the same time.
For the Corellian trilogy, that should have been before.
Well, but
Because
there's that 10th one that takes place years later.
oh, Mercy Kill. You're talking about Mercy Kill. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah, it's like, see, now, okay, if we're talking about Bantam, you've got the Thrawn trilogy there. You've got the X-Wing series there, which for me are like the gold standard.
Mhm.
You got Shadows of the Empire. So I can't throw everything of Bantam away. But boy, you got some rough stuff in there with, like I said, Children of the Jedi. Although I like the concept of Bill Savis, which was used later in the Old Republic, a prison planet. That's kind of cool. Um,
Well,
uh,
but that's kind of borrowed from Dune with
oh,
Secundus, Seleucus Secundus.
sure, but I mean,
But so
how
much of
much is
Star Wars
borrowed
is,
from
yeah.
Dune?
Mhm.
So but Planet of Twilight is one of those where I cannot understand what anybody involved with that one was thinking. I just
What
I
did you
don't
think of
get it.
Crystal Star?
Okay, okay. You want to know why Crystal Star hurts me? Is
Why?
because this was still kind of early in the Bantam Publishing run, and it was a hardcover, and it had what I thought was beautiful artwork on the cover. And I wanted this book so badly, and I wanted it for my birthday, and I got it for my birthday, and I had to read that piece of garbage novel.
Drew Struzan did the cover for several of these Bantam novels.
Yep, he did. And the thing is, okay,
But he also did the He-Man movie. So,
it's like the Crystal Star is weird because it's like it's really bad. It's not good. It doesn't feel like Star Wars at all. And a lot of that is because Vonda was primarily a Star Trek writer. If you look at it as a Star Trek novel, suddenly it starts making a lot more sense. But on the other hand, I think when they put out the Essential Chronology books, they were trying real hard to do a summarized unification of all of the EU in a digestible format for somebody who didn't want to read all the novels. And in the Essential Chronology, they greatly improved some of the crappier stories. I can read The Crystal Star two ways. It's not good Star Wars, but I don't think it's as bad as I at first thought it was.
mhm.
Um, so I guess I would counter with, what do you think about the Black Fleet crisis?
Yeah, not crazy about it.
You see, I think in a lot of ways that's where Zahn was critiquing, um, because you've got Luke being mega powerful at that point, and also exploring the idea of maybe the problem, maybe the issue is that when Jedi reach a certain power level, they can't do anything, which I think is part of the core contradiction within the Jedi's philosophy. We have all
Mhm.
this power, and yet we're afraid to use it, and fear leads to the dark side, so we got to sit on our thumbs and do nothing.
Well, and then
Um,
he's dragged around the galaxy by this woman who's from the jump clearly lying to him and baiting him, and then she berates him for getting involved in stuff
yep.
and uh, defending people with violence. And I'm just like, what are we doing here? Is this just like hungover hippies who finally woke up in the 90s writing this stuff?
It is. This is subversion of the stuff, and I think that it's kind of in a similar vein to I think what Ryan Johnson was trying to do.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just not very good at it. Although those are again books that have some great cover art. Um,
Well, I think Garm Bel Iblis is a great example if from this era because when he's in the Thrawn trilogy, he's clearly a person who is competent. He had his ego bruised, but he kept in the fight, and then he gets reconciled with the leadership of the New Republic, and I think for a while he's even a senator again. He's certainly in the leadership council, but then at some point when Zahn's not writing him, he becomes this like hardliner militant in some of these books,
yep.
and that's just not the character that Zahn laid out.
See, and that's an issue that you run into when you have multiple authors all working on a series. I see in the new canon, and everybody's going to hate me for this, Luthen Rael is the new canon's version of Garm Bel Iblis. He just never reconciled with what became the rebellion. He was the necessary element that got the rebellion to coalesce and
Hmm.
that pushed the Empire to squeeze harder so that somebody would take action. He's a darker character, but I think that is, and honestly, something that surprised me is that Andor pulled an awful lot of stuff from the X-Wing and TIE Fighter games, little lore things that were very tiny, but if you know them, they're there. And so that was always kind of interesting to me, in that they were pulling from a lot of different sources and recanonizing some stuff in a slightly different way.
Hmm.
But anyway, I do see a couple of references here that I wanted to address in the chat because I see people talking about it. Um, Peak Obi-Wan, let me ask an honest question. Did you really think George Lucas was going to ever adapt the EU? Short answer, no. So from your perspective, yes, George was flawed. He was all about his visual media. Well, yes, but also no. Never thought that George was ever going to adapt the EU material or necessarily accept it as his own. What he would do was use that as a profit generation engine, and for the things that he was visually interested in, he would cherry pick them and drop them into his things. And that's kind of the way George works. He's really a visual guy, as you mentioned. Um, that said, I think it was a mistake for Disney not to dip into that well in the same way that he would do, only more so, because they did have good stories and good templates that they could have adapted. That doesn't mean that you would create them verbatim as they were in the novels, but you could at least build a structure and discard the things that didn't work while keeping the things that did. And in that way, you could satisfy both the fans who had been there for the EU and that had supported them through, at that point, a couple decades, while also having good story concepts that would draw in the casual audience who knew nothing about it. Instead, they just decided, nah, we know better. Um, Frank A is saying, hey, Lorn, about the Star Wars EU getting decanonized, Tron had the same thing happen where there was a game as a sequel to the original film that got decanonized by Legacy. Yeah, that was Tron 2.0, and people loved that game.
And
I
there was
never
a Tron
actually,
TV series that also um, it leads into Legacy, but the TV series also ignored Tron 2.0.
yep, I never actually got to play it. I've seen some videos of it. Um, it's one that I think actually would be kind of cool if it got remastered, but unfortunately, I never did get to see it. So, anyway, that was all that I wanted to cover there in the chat comments. Let me go ahead and get to our first story for the night.
I think
That,
you've also got some super chats in there too,
oh, I do have one
or at
here.
least
That's good. Or rather, it's a super sticker from Photon Empress for 4.99. Hey, good to see you out there. I didn't know that you were here. Um, I can't see what it is. I don't know if you can you see it, Martin? Can you see the sticker?
I'm gonna scroll back to it, but yes, it is a dancing sugar pot.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thanks for being here. Glad that you could make the show tonight. Um, our first story for the night is a Disney CEO claims AI could make vacation planning easier by Sham Lee from that park place.
Made it so complicated. You'll need a digital assistant to handle it for
That
you.
was my take on this, and also more because I think we'll talk about it afterwards. But yeah, I see this as sinister. Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro has shared how artificial intelligence could play a role in improving the process of planning visits to its theme parks. He stated the company is already using AI tools and claimed the tech could reduce complexity and support more personalized trip planning for guests. A Disney vacation means a lot to our fans, and we're using AI to reduce the complexities around planning and booking a trip and trying to make that whole experience specifically tailored to what our guests want most, D'Amaro stated in the Disney Q2 fiscal 2026 earnings call. We see a significant opportunity to make it easier for families to plan their trip, to optimize all their time with us, and to personalize their experience. Disney has not announced a standalone AI tool specifically for vacation planning. Instead, the company has positioned AI as an enhancement to existing digital systems. Disney guests have bemoaned how the planning process for a Disney vacation has become increasingly complex. Resort reservations, park reservations, and using the app to plan food, a lightning lane, and more. Families can no longer just show up spontaneously and disconnect from their devices for the day. AI could build on the current structure and simplify by offering more personalized recommendations and streamlining the process. This could make even the planning of a Disney vacation a little less stressful and a bit more enjoyable. The company wants to use AI in other areas of the parks as well. CFO Hugh Johnston shared that the company is currently working on an initiative aimed at improving guest experiences, particularly through more efficient staffing. The effort involves using forecasting tools to better estimate how many cast members are needed across the parks. We're focused on an initiative to implement precision labor demand forecasting across our theme parks, he said. We think that one has the potential to create a better guest experience, a better employment experience, and also better cost management for the company. The initiative would allow Disney to better plan and manage staffing needs across the tens of thousands of cast members working at its parks. Diamaro described technology as a major tool the Disney company will continue to utilize, while reassuring consumers that it will not replace human creativity. Diamaro said that exploring new technology is a priority for the company, saying, "Embracing emerging technologies is one of the 3 priorities that we laid out in our shareholder letter this morning. It's something that every part of our company is squarely focused on, both our internal operations as well as our customer-facing areas across each of our business segments." Diamaro stated later in the earnings call, "We're committed to implementing AI in a way that keeps human creativity at the center of everything that we do, and of course respect creators and the tremendous value of our own intellectual property." Johnston shared that AI could even increase consumers' desire for real-world experiences like the Disney parks. "We see our experiences business as well positioned structurally in a world of rising AI-driven content," he said. "We think it may end up increasing even more the value consumers place on authentic, real-life experiences with those that they are close to, like we deliver across the parks and resorts every day." Disney has indicated that AI may help simplify theme park vacation planning in the future. The company is exploring how the technology can integrate with existing digital systems used by guests. Under CEO Josh Diamaro, Disney continues to develop its approach to AI across multiple business areas. So I think you hit the nail on the head, but I would go a step farther. The sinister part that I see here is I think it's going to involve surge pricing. I think they're going to be
Oh,
seeing
yeah, yeah.
what is everybody looking at, where are they booking their experiences, how packed is it, and adjust the pricing on the fly. Possibly based on prior user behavior, too. I think they're going to do everything that they can to maximize every cent that they can milk under you, and they're going to sell it as the idea is we're being more efficient. We're helping you navigate this labyrinthine system that we've created that is unnecessary, but yet lets us view everything that you're doing or want to do.
Hmm. Track your position in real time, should they choose it.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting when they talked about authentic real life experiences.
Like the park.
So the experiences you have with your children in the park, that's real. That connection is beautiful and real. But the parks are a constructed reality.
You know,
And that's not a criticism. That that's what they are meant to be. Main Street USA is not it's not the Marceline of Walt's youth. It's the idealized portrayal of that period in American history. It
yep.
was never real, but it's what we can look to.
And it gives you feelings of nostalgia for a place that maybe you didn't even come from.
Hmm.
That's kind of the magic of the thing is that you may not have grown up in that era or lived in a city that was like this, but you long for the feeling that you did. And when you construct that facade and you put people in that place and time, it gives you a homey feeling even if you never had a home like that.
Yeah, and it's not even it's an American experience, but it's not the universal American experience of Walt's era. It's a very Midwestern thing. It wasn't Southern California. It certainly wasn't the American South. And that's not a racial thing. It's just the architecture is just entirely wrong for the American South. And it wasn't the Northeast. It was the Midwest. That was his world. And he's inviting you into it.
I agree. Our next story up. is Tatiana Maslany admits people would be so mad to see She-Hulk return to Marvel. This by Marvin Montanaro on Geeks and Gamers. Marvel Studios has spent the post-Endgame era trying to convince audiences that every Disney Plus experiment was secretly a success story. But every once in a while, somebody involved accidentally says the quiet part out loud. This time it was Tatiana Maslany, She-Hulk herself. While promoting her new Apple TV Plus series Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed, the actress behind Jennifer Walters openly acknowledged the backlash surrounding She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and admitted she isn't exactly convinced fans are eager to see the character return to the MCU. I don't know, Maslany said when asked about She-Hulk making a return for Season 2, or as a cameo somewhere else in the Marvel Universe. I think people would be so mad at me being on their screens again. That's a pretty remarkable admission from the lead actress of what was supposed to be one of Marvel's flagship Disney Plus projects, and honestly, it reflects reality far more than the usual Hollywood spin machine ever does. Maslany also suggested that any future She-Hulk return would only work if creator Jessica Gao returned to guide the character. I think it would take somebody like Jessica Gao to weave her into that world because she knows that character so deeply and loves her and gets her tone. But there's something about She-Hulk being the star of her own show that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? She said. Because of the direct address, she is our narrator, so I think it would be a real cool challenge to see her in some other context, but I do think, like, the sort of joy of She-Hulk is in the singularness of it, which is a way of saying, yeah, they ain't calling.
Don't worry about it. Boston's not a college town,
The
as they
problem with
say in
that
Spinal Tap.
the problem with that argument is that the tone Gao established became one of the most divisive things Marvel has produced during the Disney Plus era. The series leaned heavily into fourth wall breaking comedy that didn't land, openly mocked the Marvel fandom, and culminated in a finale that effectively stopped the story dead so Jennifer Walters could lecture Marvel Studios itself. Some viewers appreciated the meta humor. A lot of others absolutely hated it. Instead of feeling like a major MCU event, She-Hulk quickly became a cultural punching bag. There was a time when anything connected to Marvel felt untouchable. That's not the case anymore. Post-Endgame, Marvel has struggled with audience fatigue, declining enthusiasm, inconsistent writing, and Disney Plus oversaturation. But She-Hulk became one of the clearest examples of the studio losing touch with portions of its audience. The show was relentlessly criticized for its visual effects, uneven comedy, pedestrian courtroom writing, and its openly antagonistic relationship with fans. Rather than trying to win skeptical viewers over, the series often seemed more interested in mocking criticism before episodes had even aired. That strategy may have generated headlines and social media engagement for a few weeks, but it didn't create lasting enthusiasm for the character. Marvel has also conspicuously avoided doing much with She-Hulk since the series ended in 2022. Despite constant speculation about appearances in future Avengers products or crossover events, the character has largely vanished from the larger MCU conversation. Maslany's own comments now make it sound like even she understands why. Maslany's relationship with Disney itself also reportedly hasn't improved much since She-Hulk ended. Last year, when Jimmy Kimmel was suspended for 5 days following outrage over comments tied to the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk, Maslany publicly encouraged followers on social media to cancel Disney Plus and Hulu. Yeah, that'll help get you brought back in. Disney owns both platforms and remains the company most directly tied to her biggest mainstream role. At a time when Marvel is already facing mounting pressure ahead of Avengers Doomsday, Disney likely isn't thrilled seeing former MCU stars publicly urging customers to walk away from the company's streaming services. Marvel now finds itself in an awkward spot with any She-Hulk return. On paper, Jennifer Walters is a major comic book character with decades of history and strong connections to the broader Marvel universe. In practice, the Disney Plus adaptation became so divisive that even the lead actress jokes about audiences not wanting her back. Could Marvel eventually bring She-Hulk back in a smaller crossover role? Sure. Stranger things have happened in comic book movies. But Maslany's comments reveal something important. Even internally, there seems to be an understanding that the character, as presented in the Disney Plus series, never truly connected with a large portion of the audience. And in an era where Marvel desperately needs wins, reviving one of its most polarizing Disney Plus projects may not be the safest gamble.
So it seems to me like she's saying the fans would hate it, but she's also saying, and I wouldn't do anything differently.
Yep. because it had such a singular vision and appealed to her sensibilities, and also was the biggest thing that she'd ever done. In a weird way, I kind of wondered if these comments weren't her trying to court them to hire her back, because I think she understands that they also kind of hate the fandom. So
Hmm.
she's like saying, you know, they'd really hate it if you brought me back. Wink, wink. But
You know
I
what
don't think.
might have been interesting? So I was never a huge She-Hulk reader, but it did seem to me like as Jessica, she's shy and reserved, and She-Hulk lets her id run wild in the same way that Bruce Banner is um is timid himself, but the Hulk is all the rage from his abusive life when he was a child.
Yep.
So if they had played with that in a way that they couldn't for its era, or with that staff of writers, where Jessica is the sort of woman who um, those writers would have loved, but She-Hulk is not. She-Hulk is the eye candy character that she was in the '90s for Marvel, and just hams it up and loves it and breaks the fourth wall and has fun with the fans. That would have been interesting.
Yep. And it would have been what they wanted. But that's what I think up until very, very recently, that's the very thing that Disney has been avoiding at all costs. It's very much it's this weird thing where it's like you will take your medicine, and it's like, and that's never a way to convince somebody that it's a good idea to take their medicine,
Right,
you
and
know?
this is the company that told us a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Yep. But they refused to lighten it until they became so economically desperate that they're begging the fans to now come back. And this is one of the reasons that, again, I think the Mandalorian and Grogu is just going to pancake on the pavement. And I feel badly about that because this is actually a show that I do want to succeed, despite what happened in the third season. I would love to see it return to what it was in the first two seasons and be something that we could all enjoy, but
Hmm.
I don't think it even has a chance. So there we go.
I'm hoping it doesn't become the Bo-Katan movie.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing is I'm trying to get caught up before the movie comes out, so I'm actually in the third season of The
Hmm.
Mandalorian right now. I had only watched it the one time when it came out, and I hadn't watched it since. And boy, it is so painfully obvious that they were trying to make that character shift. Um,
I paid attention, like I watched it all, but I only paid attention through like the first couple episodes of Book of Boba Fett, and then I just kind of went through the motions of having it on while I scrolled on my phone through the rest of Boba Fett, and then season 3 of The Mandalorian.
I think there are a couple of episodes that I like in season three, but only a couple, and the rest are just terrible. I think the Book of Boba Fett is better than season three of The Mandalorian, and that is just awful criticism. that's that's
Hit
that's
me with
a
faint praise.
yeah, that's a horrible thing to say, but I think it's true. They truly lost their way there. Um, I wanted to. I don't know if I'll be able to read all of this. I'm going to try. Because I thought this was important. I wanted to read this. Um, this is from Carol Brown, who has joined us on the M4 Empire. Uh, it has there is this
I
charity
noticed her
comic that
icon
she.
is the long hair.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was so interesting to see her with long hair. But this is a project that is very important to her, and that's why I wanted to read this and direct you guys to it. Tales from Twisted Raven's charity comic seeks to help children in hospitals. And you can see this is some of her talking about it here, a story that gives back. Working together with comic books for kids, every pre order helps bring comics to children in need. And this is a really personal story for her. This is her words talking about her experience. 2025 was a terrible year for me. Family members passing, tension in social circles, and the cherry on top, a breast cancer diagnosis followed by a flood of copays tied to life saving treatment. It reached a point where I had to start a Give Send Go just to keep up with the bills. Thankfully, through the kindness of others, the campaign met its goal, and I could go back to stressing about cancer instead of cancer and finances. Even as someone who writes for a living, I don't have the words to fully capture what the support around the Give Send Go meant. It reminded me of something simple that's easy to forget when life gets crazy. People are good. After my double mastectomy surgery, while I was kept overnight in the hospital for observation, I spent hours staring at the wall, specifically the whiteboard with my medical team scribbled across it. Lacey was my favorite nurse. Alone with my thoughts. If you've spent even 10 minutes in a doctor's office, you know how time stretches in those spaces. But I was grateful for it, and the time it gave me to ponder over the choices I made in my life, where I was, and where I wanted to be. The hospital sent me home the next day. That night, back home in my recliner, I kept thinking about the people who showed up. Those who gave, reached out, and took time out of their lives to help me through mine, and I made a promise. I told God I would find a way to pay that kindness back. Not someday, not when it was convenient, not as an idea I'd get to eventually, as soon as possible. Once the fog from the pain meds started to lift, I began going through my list of contacts, combing through who did what and the effect it had. A few hours later, I reached out to Mark at Comic Books for Kids and said, I want to collaborate. It's hard to explain over text. When is a good time for a call? That call, meant to last 15 minutes, ran over an hour. We talked through everything. What I'd been through, what I wanted to build, the challenges Mark faced getting appropriate content into hospitals, and the reality that he needed help to keep growing what he had started. By the time we hung up, the plan was formed in my mind. That was how Tales from Twisted Ravens was born. Comic Books for Kids is built around a simple idea that carries more weight than it seems at first glance. Get comics into the hands of children who are sitting in hospitals and cancer centers, often facing more than most adults ever have to process. This is not a vague initiative or a one-off effort. It's an ongoing hands-on operation that works directly with hospitals, clinics, and care centers to deliver age-appropriate, child-friendly comics to young patients. These books are not randomly distributed or left to chance. They are vetted to meet hospital standards, packaged with care, and delivered under strict safety and infectious disease protocols to ensure that they can safely reach the children who need them. The organization has built relationships with healthcare providers and publishers alike, creating a steady pipeline of books that are appropriate, accessible, and ready to be placed directly into waiting rooms, treatment centers, and patients' hands. In many cases, these comics are brand new, specifically chosen to give kids something that feels like it belongs to them in an environment where very little does. What makes this effort worth trusting is not just the mission, but the consistency behind it. This is work that has been carried forward through real logistics, real coordination, and a commitment to making sure the books actually arrive where they are supposed to go. It's not about awareness for its own sake. It's about follow-through. From the outside, it is easy to think of a comic book as something small, something meant purely for entertainment. But in the hospital setting, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a break from the constant noise of machines, a moment of normalcy in an unfamiliar place, and something a child can hold on to when so much around them feels uncertain. That is the gap Comic Books for Kids exists to fill, and it's one they continue to show up for, one shipment at a time. At its core, Tales from Twisted Ravens is a dark fairy tale, a hint of Brothers Grimm's and W. W. Jacobs, series centered on children who find their way into a mysterious wishing shop where every wish comes with a cost. The world leans into the strange and the magical, but it never drifts far from the emotional truth that anchors it. There's wonder in it, but there is also consequence, and the two are inseparable. The first story follows a girl named Anne in the aftermath of a fight with her best friend, a moment that feels small on the surface but carries the kind of emotional weight that only those moments can. In searching for a way to fix what went wrong, she finds herself inside Twin Raven Oddities, a shop that offers her exactly what she thinks she needs. A wish to make the problem disappear. But like most things in life, the act of fixing something is rarely as simple as undoing it, and what seems like a solution often reveals something deeper that cannot be ignored. This is the first of several stories that are not written to talk down to young readers or to simplify the world into something easier to digest. These stories explore the reality of difficult emotions, fear, regret, consequence, and the kind of courage it takes to move forward when things do not go as planned. Children already understand these feelings in ways that are often overlooked, and these stories choose to meet them where they are rather than soften the experience for the sake of comfort. What gives this project its weight is not just the story itself, but what happens because of it. Through the partnership with Comic Books for Kids, every copy contributes directly to placing comics, DC, Marvel, and more, oh my, into hospitals and cancer centers, expanding access to something that can provide relief, distraction, and a moment of light during difficult days. In that context, a book becomes more than a piece of entertainment. It becomes part of a larger effort to create space for hope in places where it can be hard to find. Right now, that effort is tied to a very specific goal. We're working to help raise $50,000 to support and expand this mission in a meaningful way. That number is not symbolic. It represents the ability to bring in additional help, improve distribution, and reach more hospitals and care centers than are currently being served. Much of this work has been carried forward through persistence and dedication by a small group of people who believe deeply in what they're doing. But growth requires resources, and resources make it possible to reach more children who could benefit from these stories. Each step forward means more books delivered, more rooms reached, and more moments where a difficult day is interrupted by something unexpected and good. It is a simple chain reaction, but it adds up in ways that are hard to measure and even harder to replicate without support. Choosing to support this project is not a simple transaction. It's participation in something that extends beyond the act of purchasing a book. It helps bring the physical story into existence, supports the process that gets it into the world, and ensures it reaches not only those who seek it out, but also those who may need it most without having the ability to ask for it. It allows stories to move into places that are often overlooked until they become personal. It creates opportunities for connection in environments that can feel isolating. It gives a child something to look forward to, even if only for a short while, and sometimes that's enough to shift the weight of an entire day. For those not interested in purchasing a copy, there is still a way to be part of that impact. Direct support through donations helps fuel the same mission and contributes to the same outcome. Every contribution, no matter the size, moves this forward. Or you can also spread the word about comic books for kids and raise awareness of what they work hard for each and every day. If you believe that stories can carry more weight than simple entertainment, that they can create space for reflection, comfort, and even healing, then this is one of those moments where that belief can take shape in a tangible way. Supporting Tales from Twisted Ravens and choosing to donate or even sharing the project with someone else who might connect with it are all ways of participating in something that is built with intention and aimed at making a difference. There's no pressure attached to that choice, only the opportunity to be part of something that began with gratitude and is now trying to turn that gratitude into something that reaches beyond a single person and into the lives of others who could use it. Thank you for your time. And I'm also going to share this tab here. Whoop. That's actually where you can find the book here. It's at ripascend.com, campaign/Tales from Twisted Ravens and I'll put that in the chat as well so that you guys have got it.
When did this campaign start? I see that it pre-orders end June 26, 2026.
I'm not sure if it actually says here. I don't think that there's a start date on here, and this is, I believe that there is, I'm not sure if the other link goes to the same place, so let me check that real quick.
Well, while you check
So,
that, I want to say one of the things I love about this community, and not just the That Park Place immediate community, but the other bubbles we sort of interact with, is how great everybody is and how giving and trusting everybody is with their time and their love, and when it really counts, their donations too.
yep. And I know that you guys have been on the Wilton stream as well tonight, and you have been generously giving there. If you guys don't have the means to support or participate, totally understand. Maybe if you can share the link and spread the word. I know that this is a cause that's really important to Caro, and I wanted to make sure that we got to
Mhm.
shout that out. So thanks for indulging me and taking the time to talk about that. It's really personal to her. So there you go. The links are there, and hopefully you guys like what you see.
Yeah, and on spreading the word on that, it's, sometimes we can't be the person who helps, but when we put it out to our network, maybe a couple people we know can help, which is a multiplier for us.
Yep, yep. Let me see here. There's some other stories that we had. One, I kind of wanted to cover this one, and I wanted to play the clip, but I'm a little afraid to because it's what do you think? I'll talk about it. This was Tom Felton recreating a Harry Potter wand scene in a car ad. Do you think that would get us in trouble?
Um,
Have
hmm,
you heard about this story?
I haven't. No.
It's actually a pretty cool ad. That's why I wanted to show it. Is that it surprised me that it's pretty cinematic, but I don't know for sure if it would get us in trouble playing it. So I'll read the story and maybe we'll see what you think. Um, and boy, hasn't he aged? That was kind of shocking to me to see when I realized, oh my gosh, it's been a while since these movies have been coming out. And look at how much he looks like Jason Isaacs.
Yeah.
He actually really does look like he could be his son.
Yeah, he does.
That kind of startled me. That would honestly, I think it would have been brilliant if they hired him to play Lucius. So, um, all things Harry Potter in full swing in the lead up to the HBO reboot series of the beloved books written by author J.K. Rowling. In its latest ad, Tom Felton, who played Draco Malfoy in the Harry Potter movies and continues to do so on Broadway, appeared in an ad for the Spanish car company Cupra that recreates the famous wand choosing scene from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. However, there's a twist. And this is the video. I'm. They describe it. I'll read it below, and then we'll talk about whether I can show it. Tom Felton is shown walking towards a building that appears to be an empty warehouse. The halls are dark, but as he walks farther, he sees a light that leads him into a vast room filled with steering wheels behind glass, with a stern-looking red-haired woman manning the counter. The woman addresses him, stating, "I was waiting for you." The scene then imitates almost to the T how Harry acquired his wand at Ollivander's wand shop in the books, from the lines to the overall tone and the feeling of the scene. As Tom Felton gazes at the wheels behind the glass, the woman, who is playing Ollivander in this, says, "Let's see which one is right for you." The camera pans up and reveals that the room is shaped like a steering wheel. As the woman hands Felton the first steering wheel, the line she utters is nearly identical to the one Ollivander said to Harry in the first book. From then on, each beat copies the scenario set in the book as each steering wheel is presented. The first opens drawers, causing papers to fly out. The second shatters all the glass in the room, and Tom Felton is blown backward from an invisible force. Even the line, "No, not quite," hits home for any Potter fan who hears it. The rooms shift as the woman presents the final wheel, recreating the scene where the wand chooses the wizard, or in this case, sometimes it's not the driver who chooses the car, it's the car that chooses the driver. Finally, Tom Felton speeds down the lane as the music, which is very reminiscent of the Harry Potter theme, swells, driving his own Cupra car to end the ad. It's a very clever way to sell a car, especially for Potter fans old enough to buy a new vehicle. Maybe other companies should take a leaf out of the Cooper ad team's book and start making commercials people will actually want to watch, rather than the sterile, monotone ads most of us see on TV or even on YouTube. And that article's by Jessica Lindstrom there at Geeks and Gamers.
But
I
we
was
don't
actually
get to see the
surprised.
car
What's that?
in our article. We don't get to see the car.
Um, I wonder, can I? I was hoping we'd get a better shot of it.
Is that like a crossover or a hot hatch? Nah, it's a little raked out for
I
a
think that's
British
as
hot
close as
hatch.
there. You get a better shot of it a little bit.
It's not bad.
I guess I can step through it real quickly. We won't play it, but
Hmm.
you can kind of see that. Keep accidentally right clicking.
Usually, when an actor is going into an abandoned warehouse, it's not to pick a car.
It is a little strange place to go for one. But man, look at those steering wheels.
Some classics in there.
They spent some money on this ad.
They really did, yeah.
That's actually kind of why I liked it. Is that it's obvious that they wanted to make this cinematic, and I
Hmm.
actually appreciated the effort. You can see the whole car coming together there, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, I liked the way it was rotating around them like gears coming together. It was nice.
Yeah, I mean, Normally we wouldn't necessarily highlight an ad, but I thought that this was movie adjacent enough that it would be kind of fun to talk about. And I'm sure that you guys can find it on YouTube if you want to go look at it. I see that yeah, I agree it's not worth the chance. I never want to take a risk, especially when YouTube is being a little ban happy lately. So
Yeah, are
I'll
we authentic content? I worry about that these days.
well, I think that I'm as authentic as I can be. But I know that's why Pro is getting real serious about building a studio. um, it's going to be awesome when you guys get to see it too. I think that it's going to surprise and delight everybody. So I hope so anyway. Um, we're probably to the main point where we can get deep into this lore discussion if you want to. So
Yeah, sure.
I will let you lay out your case and we'll see where this conversation goes. I think this could be interesting.
All right. So you want to do redemption first, since we kind of touched on that already?
If you want to, I don't
Okay.
care
Yeah.
which way we take it. We can
Yeah.
just.
Let's do redemption first, because that seems like more the low hanging fruit, since this is a special edition problem and not
Okay.
an original problem.
All right.
And again, to restate, because we hit it at the beginning, and maybe some people have you don't tune in anymore. I guess you click in.
Yeah.
But it's my belief that in the original version of Return of the Jedi, Sebastian Shaw plays unmasked Vader.
Mhm.
And when he dies, his Force Ghost appears to his son. And there's that moment there where he's reconciled with Obi-Wan and Yoda, and he has become one with the Force, which is Lucas's redemption for Vader. But in the special editions, when Hayden Christensen is there, I believe that's picked for reasons outside of storytelling. It's there because he wants to tie in to the prequel trilogy, because Sebastian Shaw's a little too old for the timeline to continue, and he doesn't look anything like Hayden Christensen, or for that matter, Mark Hamill. Which, oddly, Hayden Christensen sort of does have a look like young Mark Hamill,
Mhm.
but it demonstrates it demonstrates a lack of understanding of redemption, or maybe creates a problem with, to use the word redemption here, because when a person is redeemed, and I'm not using this in an exclusively Christian way, even though that is my background. Um, Redemption is reconciliation to someone else. It's actually a business term. It means reclaiming in a certain way. Like, you redeem your ticket, and you go pick up your jacket at Coat Check. You've redeemed it. You've gotten it back. But when a person is redeemed, they the things that they have done that they need to be redeemed for aren't taken away from them in their life. It doesn't disappear from who you are. You're still the man who did those things. You're still the person who bears those scars. So for Christensen to be the Force Ghost is demonstrates a lack of understanding of what redemption is, because Anakin does not go back to being that person. That person is gone.
Okay. I'm going to ask some questions.
Sure.
Is this based? I mean, obviously, he doesn't go back to being that person.
Uh-huh.
It's not as though the Force Ghost of Anakin is the 19 to 22-year-old
The
Anakin.
dashing hero he was in the Clone Wars.
Right, but physically he appears that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that Lucas is making the case per se that it's as though Anakin has actually reverted to that younger age.
Mm-hmm.
And I have another reason to back this up that we'll get to in a minute. But physically he is represented that way. So I would argue that from a cinematic standpoint, in a way, I think what you're saying is that the issue is that his body is whole. as opposed to him being a multiple amputee floating in the air,
Well, but no,
which
I don't have a problem with Sebastian Shaw standing there instead of leaning on something in the like with a giant tiny Tim crutch.
okay. So if you go with me that far, then
Uh-huh.
then the issue is not the physical restoration of the form.
Mhm.
I think your
Well,
issue
we're getting into
is,
Pauline doctrine in the Star Wars
well,
universe.
honestly, this is kind of what I think makes this fascinating is we are having a theological discussion, but within the bounds of the theology as presented within the Star Wars universe.
Right, which is a pantheistic paganism.
Well, and it gets interesting because it's also ill-defined,
Yes.
and so that's really what we're trying to do is square what does the Force actually want? And I think that's where we get into the balance discussion. But
What are the wills?
well, that's a whole other thing. Um, but that could be fun too. We could go that direction, and this is why I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. So, um, my first counterpoint would be, I think your argument is what the physical representation implies without stating.
That's probably true. I will grant that, but it is a visual medium.
Yes, and that's where my counter argument is going to come from. That implication is drawn by you without being stated by the author. And the reason that I can say that is that they have continued to tinker with the movies multiple times since the special editions were originally released. And in each subsequent release, they have aged Anakin's Force Ghost up slightly. So if you look at Anakin in the most recent release, he is older than he is in the prequels. It's not a huge age up, but it's there.
If they just reshot that scene with him now, it'd be age appropriate, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would actually. The angle I thought you were going to tackle this question from was personal redemption versus um, culpability for his crimes.
Oh yeah, no, he's certainly a war criminal.
Okay, so but I think we could still tackle that question in kind of an interesting way.
Yeah, oh, we could definitely talk about that.
So, what do you think Vader's redemption, if he was redeemed? Okay, let's start there.
Okay,
Was Vader redeemed in any way?
so if becoming one with the Force is only achievable by a Jedi, and I'll even say a master Jedi who is is at peace with the Force. He's given up, and this is a Lucas thing, and this actually relates to the balance stuff later. But if he's given up the will to dominate and to possess, and he's at peace, like Qui-Gon was with the living Force, and that's how he becomes one with the Force and becomes a Force ghost, then yes, I think his appearance there indicates he is redeemed, at least spiritually.
I'm going to draw a slight distinction with you.
Okay. Hey, you're the lore master here. I'm newer at this.
I think you're on the right track. I think you're close. I don't see it as. How did you phrase it? Tell me how you phrased it again, because your wording was important.
Okay. And that was all kind of stream of consciousness, so I don't remember exactly. But was it the thing about being one with the living Force?
Okay, so I'll just give you my argument, and then you can counter it if there's a disagreement.
Okay.
What allows you to merge with the Force to retain your identity after death, I don't think necessarily is taking a redeeming act per se.
Oh, okay. So this is maybe where it was, because I was talking about giving up all those things from the dark side that Lucas has in outside material talked about, being possessive and
Yes, but
self-seeking and things like that.
it's not just that though.
Okay.
It's possessiveness in the sense of accepting your mortality. It is accepting the fact that you are going to die and passing into death. and then having the will to retain that identity as you move into the living force. So the nature of the Sith is to be grasping and controlling and to dominate.
Hmm.
But if all you were doing was giving that up, but still resisting the natural end that the force has drawn you to, you wouldn't be able to merge with the living force.
Right,
So
but
it
he's
would,
lying there on the deck saying, "Leave me here."
yes, and also took the action knowing that it would kill him to toss the Emperor down the reactor shaft.
Hmm.
So he made a conscious choice to give up everything in life, including his son. And so that is the act that I believe allows him to pass into the living force. But then we come to redemption and culpability. And so we agree that he is certainly not, he does not suddenly become not a war criminal, and he would still need to stand trial were he to survive what
Hmm.
happened.
Right. Well, I do want to go back 1 second here because he, on one level, this is a father protecting his son,
Mhm.
which is an act of will in itself.
And you could argue selfish.
Right. And you can argue, but that's what I'm saying. Like it by an act of will, I was thinking like, okay, so Lucas obviously borrows from the iconography of mendicant orders and also Eastern philosophy and stuff like that. And the monks not speaking was like and them suppressing their will in this world
Mhm.
and allowing the world and God's will to be greater than theirs. So in the same way, Vader intervening for his son is a supreme act of will,
Mhm.
which could theoretically still be a dark side thing. But him saying his dying breath saying, "Tell your sister you were right about me. There was still good."
Yep.
That indicates that it wasn't. And then further, him becoming one with the force and maintaining his personality afterwards indicates on a spiritual level in this theology he is redeemed.
Okay, so here is where I think the more interesting part of the discussion may come, and that's where you wanted to touch on balance, but I
Mhm.
think we need to talk about the force itself.
Okay.
And this is where we get an awful lot of real vagueness, and that was deliberate on the part of Lucas. He wanted it to be ill-defined so that you don't get caught up in all the doctrinal issues. But that's
Mhm.
what we're diving into is what is the doctrine exactly? Um,
Ill-defined works best for an hour and a half long movie.
Absolutely. So make your case on balance, and let's see where this goes.
Okay. So it seems to me, first, I want to dispel this. I'm not talking about the numbers thing. Although it is intriguing that in the prophecy, go
Let me
ahead.
stop. Let me stop you real quick because I see a
Mhm.
comment I have to address. Mike Glass. Even though they share the same body, Anakin and Vader are separate personalities slash people. No, I disagree with that vehemently. In Anakin's mind, that is how he has excused his actions. That is how he justifies to himself what he is doing. He disassociates himself from himself before the fall and creates this personality that essentially denies that Anakin lived, but it is untrue. And from the perspective of the Force, that is why you wouldn't see Vader disappearing from the suit, for instance. Um, they're you could argue that they are separate personalities in Anakin's mind, but they are certainly not separate people. Do you disagree?
I don't disagree with that at all. I take a very Solzhenitsyn view of it and say that the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of each man.
And this is where I think another interesting thing about Star Wars comes into play. Star Wars cosmology is not about good and evil, although it appears to be
Mhm.
in the narrative. It's about light and dark, which are two different things. So touch on balance and let's see where
Sure.
we go.
All right. So as I was saying, it's interesting that the prophecy says that he'd be the one to bring balance to the Force, and then in the end of that trilogy, there's there's a Master Jedi and or I guess a Grandmaster Jedi and a Master Jedi, and then there's a Sith and his apprentice, which on a surface level seems like balance. But Lucas has said over and over that's not what he's talking about.
Yep.
So I'm not using that. I just think it is an interesting avenue that they could have gone down, where the Jedi totally misunderstood the prophecy, thought it was this grand glorious thing, because obviously what we believe is the balance thing. But then, there's a rug pull that could have been an interesting thing, but that's not the thing Lucas was going for. Also, I realized as when I was thinking about this, I might be reacting more to the way the Jedi present themselves than to what Lucas actually believes. Because, and I've made this argument before, like when we talked about the Jedi not being attached to things, and Yoda's sort of blasé attitude towards people die. That's the attitude of a 900-year-old being, and humans don't live that long.
And well, this gets into an interesting quirk of the Jedi in that, and I kind of disagree with this, but it's a George Lucas thing, so I can't really disagree with it too hard. The prequel era Jedi have no idea whatsoever that they can preserve their identity after death. The only one who knew that was Qui-Gon.
And he seems to have found it out after death.
Well, it seems that way, but that's not the case. There is a backstory for Qui-Gon that explains why he knows that and how he knows that, although that's never actually been explored in story.
Right, but I'm only going off of Yoda's
purely
line
cinematic.
in the third one. Okay, yeah. In the third one, Yoda says, an old friend has discovered. And so I assumed that meant Qui-Gon figured it out after death that he was still around. Or at least how to reach back out to our material realm.
Do you know the backstory for that? Do you know how he discovered that?
No, I don't. Is it comic books? Because I don't remember reading it in the novels from his era.
To my knowledge, this wasn't actually explored in novel or story. It was just given as backstory from George directly.
Okay.
And it is that at some point in his earlier travels that Qui-Gon encountered a Force shaman that taught him the ability to retain his identity after death. And it is implied that this shaman was in contact with or knew about in some way the Wills. And so we don't know anything about this shaman, and I think the fact that they described him as a shaman implies that he's not actually a Jedi, which is something that I think is interesting. But that is...
Well, I do know that in the expanded universe, if I'm remembering this correctly, in Tales of the Jedi, there's a part where, is it Keldroma who's falling away? It's been a while since I read that.
Yes.
Okay. He's falling away, but he's not quite away yet. And his master has died. And somebody asks him, has he appeared to you? As like, of course he would appear to you if you were connected.
As though this were common knowledge. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's where you get into the split between the EU and George's vision. And honestly, this is an argument that I've made for quite a while, is that I think George's understanding of Star Wars is much, much different than the audience's understanding of Star Wars. I think that he believes that we all misunderstand it. I think that he's focusing on different things than the audience is, generally speaking. And, okay, I'll say this too. It's important to remember what the backlash to the prequels was like. They were pretty roundly mocked and humiliated, and this actually hurt George. It soured his relationship in many ways with the property, with the fans, and I think that it partially led to him deciding it was time to retire. He was asked one time by a fan who approached him when he was going to do the sequel trilogy, and he basically snapped, "Why would I do them
Hmm.
for how you treated the last ones I did?" Now, he did create the story treatments for 7, 8, and 9. He sold those to Disney. I think he thought that they were going to utilize him for input. I think he thought he was going to be able to guide the story. We know some hints about what his story treatments involved. I honestly think that the fan base would have hated his movies just as much as they hate the Disney ones. Um, and I don't say that lightly. Um, a lot of the concepts that George had for those story treatments did make their way into the Disney movies. A lot of the initial framing, at least, does exist in the 7, 8, and 9 that we got. A lot of it doesn't, but a lot of it does. More than that, though, he was going to dive deep into the metaphysical side of the Force, involving the midichlorians and the wills, and what he called the microbiotic world of Star
Hmm.
Wars, which was sort of what the Force is layered over. And I think that would have gotten just a little too metaphysical for the general audience.
So
uh,
it's funny, like you and I can talk about this stuff, and but we can also put it aside and go enjoy the larger concepts that are painted over very quickly.
yep.
It's funny though that he wants to drill into it when the fans really do just want a fun space opera.
Yeah, but I mean, it's interesting. I think George Lucas of 1974, let's say, is a much different guy than George Lucas of 2012.
Oh, and
He
if he wasn't, it'd be disturbing.
he deliberately kept the Force very vague in those original movies, and in fact, there was some question as to whether or not he was even going to include the concept of the Force. He toyed with the idea of maybe this is a little too silly, and I think it was Marcia, if I remember right, who convinced him no, that has to be in there. And it proved to be a really smart decision. Actually, I think keeping it vague and just topical enough to be fairy tale appropriate was the
Mhm.
correct move. But as he's gotten older, and I think this was probably because at his age, he's thinking about mortality. And I think that may have been part of why he wanted to dive into the greater metaphysical concepts of what the Force is and how it works. And I remember when he first started talking about midichlorians, I heard it as a rumor before the prequels came out. There were a couple things that happened. There were people that were getting leaks and revealing them back at that time in the early days of the internet. But they also had the first edition of the Star Wars Encyclopedia come out. And before it came out, the page on midichlorians leaked. And there was heavy debate about whether this was real or not. People were outraged. And like many, I hated the concept. I still think it's a mistake to get more specific about the Force. But the more, like Miriam, that pod play should be called "Agree to Disagree." Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. Maybe we should subtitle it that. Um, Basically, in the Star Wars universe, the midichlorians are just a replacement for mitochondria in your cells. This is
Right.
his way
He
of
has said that explicitly.
looking at it. And when you look at the Force from the standpoint of, and this is where I think we get into what the Force is. What Obi-Wan says, or I'm sorry, what Yoda says, is that life creates it and makes it grow. There is a cycle of life. This is where you get the yin yang part
Mhm.
of Star Wars. There is life and there is death, and those do have to be held in a kind of balance. You cannot have people living forever. Likewise, you don't want everything to crumble to dust. But the thing that expands and makes the Force is life itself. It naturally is created by life. Uh, in some ways, it's a little bit like a battery. Um, and for the Force to work, for you to be able to interact with it, you do have to have a way to tap into it. And the way that he explains that is through the midichlorians. They are the engine of life within your cells. If life creates it and makes it grow, that part actually does make sense. What we tend to rebel against is the idea of you're turning a religion into a science. And it's like, well,
Hmm.
actually, it's a little bit of both. If you're a religious person and you believe in God, I think you still probably believe you have cells within your body. And I think you probably believe that the mitochondria are the engines that make those cells live and work. So, how is that any different?
Well, I think that so in our world where there's not midichlorians to our knowledge, but you have the mind to brain issue, and which is that there is a physical construct that is the brain,
Yep.
and there may be a separate function of life that is the mind. And those two things interact, but they're not the same. And so keeping it in that sort of um, physical, metaphysical realm, you don't need the midichlorians or midichlorians. It's just simply some people are more attuned to this or not. Now that doesn't explain why it is the force is strong with my family. My father
Okay.
had it. My
See,
sister
now,
has it.
this is where, and actually, I see a comment here that's addressing on this. This is Icelandic Fart Police saying, for a long time, I had just headcanoned that midichlorians were an after effect, like a symbiote species or something, that were attracted to Force users, more attracted to people with stronger Force. And
That's what I thought too.
I understand where that's coming from, but I would say actually no. Everybody has midichlorians. Some people produce more than others. But honestly, this is where I think the Jedi went wrong. They were taking blood counts on people and assuming that midichlorian count correlated to ability. The more midichlorians you have, the stronger that you can be. They're looking for the chosen one. But George himself has said it's not actually about that. It has more to do with your ability to interact with the force. Your power has more to do with your training, your ability to still yourself and listen to the will of the force, and then interact with it in a way that allows you to manifest the effect that you are trying to make occur, whether that be force suggestion, force push, force pull, what have you. Um, but that is why emptying yourself, this is the Eastern philosophy part of this,
Hmm.
is so important to being attuned with the Force. Is that what you're doing is you're listening to the promptings that you are hearing through your interaction with the midichlorians and the Force. Um, when your ego enters the conversation, when you start trying to force it, it slips away. And this
Hmm.
also has to do with a bit of the difference between the Jedi and the Sith. And this, in that formulation, it kind of breaks a little bit because when you become a Sith, I view it as George said that you're unlocking another level. It's a level above what the Jedi can get to when it comes to brute forcing the Force.
Hmm.
But I see it in a way that is like if life creates the Force and makes it grow, the Sith are imposing their will upon it, and they are brute forcing it in a way that is, it's not that they are creating more life, they are feeding on it. They are burning the midichlorians within their own blood to fuel the effect. And this is why there is degradation. It's part of why their eyes glow. It's why I would argue it's why Palpatine looks the way that he does. I do not believe that the change in appearance or the scarring is due to the lightning. I think that that is his public explanation. I think that it is literally how he appeared the entire time, but he was fogging everyone's ability to see him that way.
That's one
So
of the tricks Luke does in the Bantam series or Bantam novels. He's able to change his appearance through the Force.
yeah, it's to me it is for the Jedi, it is the ability to still yourself, empty your mind, listen to the promptings of the Force,
Hmm.
and the effect of your power has to do with how in line with the will of the Force are you. And this is where we get into kind of a tricky conversation, I think, because will implies consciousness, or at least a desire.
Yeah.
And I always viewed the Force prior to all of the prequel stuff as being a little bit like a sleeping or comatose god. There is a will to it, but it is not a conscious will, if you get my meaning. It has a purpose, but it is not necessarily acting with intent. And your ability to tap into that motive force of the universe, the thing that makes the universe possible, is, or the galaxy, if you want to say that it's just a single galaxy, is your ability to tap into that pseudo consciousness, if you will.
Hmm.
I think George's explanation is different. It's not a sleeping god per se. This is what I think he was going to get into in his sequels, is literally the wills. The wills are another level below everything that you see manifested in the galaxy physically. They are beings that, and this is why I think people would have really rebelled against this. I think in a way he saw, in a way, I think that he sees the Jedi and the Sith and all of the people in the universe as just walking flesh suits. And that the wills are like the replacement of a deity. They are ultra powerful beings, but they impose their will through this physical interaction between their domain, the Force, and the physical world that is created by the Force. And they communicate through the midichlorians their will to the skin suits that exist in the galaxy.
Hmm. Yeah.
that's that's why I think that I think the audience would go, "What?" You how would you even try and explain this cinematically? I'm sure he would find an interesting allegorical way, metaphysical way to do it. I think that's kind of what he was doing with the Mortis arc.
Okay,
Uh,
I wanted to bring that up too because I'm not a huge fan of that, but there's a lot of the Clone Wars that just wasn't for me
okay,
because
so
I maybe I don't get the Mortis arc
nobody
because
does. It hasn't been explained properly.
yeah, I feels like a I don't know, almost like a not a dream sequence exactly, a 3 episode aside to go, oh, and let's talk about this concept. But
Without really talking about it.
yes. And there's the father who represents, I think, balance between his children,
He
the
does.
sister who's supposed to be the light side, and the brother who's supposed to be the dark side.
Mhm.
And then yeah, I think it's supposed to be pretty clear that the Inquisitors are physically modeled after him coming
Mhm.
later, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the are we also supposed to see like some of Padme's clothing choices reflected in the sister?
I had never seen it that way.
Like some of her
You,
hair
you
and
mean the daughter, I assume.
yeah, the daughter, yes, yeah.
Um, um, I never put that together,
Okay.
so I'd have to hear the argument.
I'm not really trying to make an argument there because I've said I don't really understand what he's getting at with this. But
So
it does seem like this is a battle for Anakin's soul that is almost played off as if it happens in his own mind by the end of it. Because remember, when they go back to the fleet, a lot less time has passed than they think it has.
yeah, and Mike is saying in the EU the ones were explained a little bit more in the Fate of the Jedi series, and yes, that's true, but I'm not accepting that here because we're talking about this from George's standpoint. Um, I can tell you what I think.
Okay.
Have no idea if it's right because they have never explained it. I understand what you mean by saying that it is like a dream and a battle for Anakin's soul. But I think it was also a real event. It's just not a real event that is as it appears.
Yeah,
To
sort of like the
me,
Harry Potter. Of course it's in your mind. That doesn't mean it's not real.
right. Okay, so yes, that's the best way to phrase it. I think this was the clearest example of the Force itself giving a prompting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question that I have about it as presented is that, and this is one of the reasons that I think it's a real event. They encounter a ship that seems to be from the old Republic period. And if I remember right, using extremely old communications codes. And they sort of get knocked out, sucked into whatever Mortis is,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the arc, they are returned to their ship, not really remembering everything that happened.
In a way, it's a lot more of a Star Trek series of episodes than a Star Wars one.
The ship is gone, but I don't think it may have been Rex. One of the clones is communicating with them, trying to raise them, and they saw the ship. Others besides them experienced whatever that ship was.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were in Mortis, whatever Mortis is, um, it's clearly not the interior of a ship. it appears
Right.
to be in an entirely different dimension, where
Well, it's a planet. It's a planet, and one side of the planet is dominated by darkness, and the other side is exposed to the light.
yes, but it also time behaves in a funny kind of manner
It
there,
does.
and the character of the planet changes depending on where the balance lies.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, this is again an EU source, so I can't accept it, but it's a similar concept. If you ever read the Dawn of the Jedi comic book series, it
I read the
mirrors
novelization.
the novel. I'd go to the comics. The comics are better. I
Mm-hmm.
was not a huge fan of the novel story. Um, the Proto Jedi on Tython had the moons Ashla and Bogan,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on whether you were out of balance, whether you were too far onto the light side or the dark side, you would be banished to one of the moons. But the entire system reacted to whether or not balance was achieved. When things were out of balance, the entire weather system on all of the planets would get extremely hostile. And so they were. This is sort of how the Force was taught to them, is that they had to remain in balance or dire consequences would occur.
Mm-hmm.
Mortis seems to mirror that after a fashion. But I think this is the Force directly reaching out and explaining itself in an allegorical way that they could grok a little bit of it. Going back to the Star Trek metaphor, suppose you had a creature from another dimension that was trying to communicate with you,
Mm-hmm.
but you only know 3 dimensions. So it's trying to explain things in a 3 dimensional way to give you as much of the image as you can process without driving you mad with an entirely different dimension that makes no sense to you.
Oh
Does that
yeah.
make
I
sense?
mean, I know you love Voyager, and
Yes.
yes, Q handled that several times with when they visited the continuum during the trial, and then also later the Q Civil War.
Yep. So I think this was the Force giving Anakin an opportunity to sacrifice himself there. He could have willfully removed himself from the universe, given up his identity and moved into the living force
And
so that
assume the role of the father.
that is what would have achieved balance. But because he didn't do that, it doomed the universe to go through the cycle as it occurred, and we got what we got. Now, I see somebody asking, is the world between worlds an outgrowth of Mortis, or are they completely separate things? To me, they're separate things, but still involve the ones. Now, the ones that Mike was talking about, they are what the EU would call the Celestials, or in the case of being inside Mortis, you're talking about balance, light, and dark. Mortis presents them as individual, very powerful beings, but in my conception, that's not really what they are. This is the concept that's being presented by the Force in an understandable way to those that the Force is trying to commune directly with. The world between worlds is within the Force, but it is a nexus for all space and time. Everything that the Force touches everywhere at any time. And when you are within the world between worlds, you can view every moment that is a pivot point within all of galactic history. And it is the one place with the influence of the Force that you can alter time and space. Now, this goes into a little bit of Rebels as well. That's where the world between worlds was originally introduced, but this is kind of an interesting concept for me, and I think ties into an important point. When they discover the world between worlds, it is Palpatine trying to tempt Ezra. And it is because Palpatine cannot enter the world between worlds by himself. He is forbidden from entering.
He's got to piggyback on somebody else.
Ezra has to open the way for him. That is why he is attempting to appear as the kindly grandfather and convince him to open this and say that we can bring order to the galaxy, just open this portal. When Ezra does finally get in there, the Emperor does everything that he can to get in there. And he uses a flame power that we'd never seen him use before. He knows about the world between worlds, but he can't enter it. And that's because I think the world between worlds is a manifestation of the living force, not the cosmic force. The cosmic force corresponds to death and regeneration. The living force literally is involved in the realm of the living. And that's why all points of space and time point to there. I think
And that's an
Palpatine.
important distinction to understand. Qui-Gon.
How do you mean?
Well, because Qui-Gon talks about listening to the living force and things like that.
Oh, yes. See, that was a new concept in the prequels, was the living and the cosmic force were not concepts in the original story. Originally,
Right.
you just had the light side and the dark side, and these are 4 aspects, not 2. Life does not automatically mean light, and dark does not automatically mean cosmic.
Mm-hmm.
The living and the cosmic force, I mean, how metaphysical do you want me to get? Imagine
well, I would say if we could paint with this brush, I'm not sure you would agree with it. The Council, the Jedi Council, has become so enslaved to thinking about the cosmic force, they've lost sight of the living force, which is why somebody like Qui-Gon can't be on the Council. Because he's too. So the Council has gotten so far up their own rear ends that they are concentrating on the cosmic force, the big things. They've forgotten about the living force, and Qui-Gon is focused on the living force, going with the flow of the world.
Well, as it's tied to him being able to retain his identity, I think that's right.
I'm just talking about the way he interacts with the universe, taking the time to pick up stray beings or whatever it is that Obi-Wan talks about.
They are so obsessed with balance that it paralyzes them. And they think that that anything that the most interesting thing to me about the prequel Jedi, and the argument that I would make, is that there was a point at which they became so terrified of Jedi falling and becoming Sith, they determined that that was all because of grasping power, wanting to control, fear
Hmm.
of loss. And so they interpreted that as the issue being attachment. So they forbid attachments.
Right.
And I think that's the seed of the Jedi's fall, because that is a fear. They are afraid of what might happen, assuming that it will always happen. Rather than letting those fears play out to their natural conclusion, they forbid attachment. Fear is the path to the dark side.
Hmm.
Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. In trying to avoid it, they create the very thing that blinds them. They are not acting in accordance with the Force's will.
Well,
If the
and this
Force.
actually goes back to what I was going to say, what I had been starting to say about balance. I may be reacting more to the Jedi doctrine as if that was Lucas's,
Yes,
um,
yes,
yeah, as if that was Word of God in the universe, but it's
pres-
not.
yes, exactly. And this is actually shown because there are other Force traditions. You have the Night Sisters of Dathomir. You have, now going back to the old EU, you've got the Yang Ti monks. You've got the Falanasi flow walkers. All of them are tapping into the
Mhm.
Force in a different way. They
Well, and
have
then
their
you've got a bunch
dogma.
of other Jedi who had left and had families and stuff.
Yes. And none of them became Sith Lords.
Hmm.
So my way of looking at it is that if life is what creates the Force and makes it grow, the Jedi are, I mean, this kind of becomes the abortion debate in a way. Um, if you're not creating life, if you are not facilitating the creation of life, then what are we doing here? Why are the Jedi special? That means the average citizen is doing more for furthering the Force's will than the Jedi themselves are.
But Lucas has said, "Oh no, Jedi can get it on. They just can't marry."
Yes, but I mean, that's the thing, though, is that I would argue, and this is where you get a little hippie-ish, the Force trends to love. Attachment is part of love.
Hmm.
Love is selflessness. Love is the ability to give up everything, which is what the Force requires. It requires that if you're going to retain your identity after death, if you're going to move into the living Force, then you have to be willing and able to do that. You have to be
Hmm.
selfless.
Which is what I was saying facilitated the redemption of Vader.
Yes. Yeah.
But
So,
we also have to remember that post-divorce Lucas is a very different man.
yes, he is. There are reasons for that. Um, I did see a question here that scrolled past. I wanted to. Uh, are you saying Palpatine is dead? That's why he can't enter the. I think that's supposed to be the world between worlds. No, it's that he is specifically forbidden from entering it. The Jedi had means to enter the world between worlds, and I believe that that's because they were on the living Force, or aligned themselves with the living Force. This would be the Jedi of old. Um, Palpatine did not have a way to open the temple in such a way that they could access the world between worlds. I don't know if you remember, but it's initially there is an archaeological expedition where Palpatine is discovering the means to enter the world between worlds. He finds this portal, but he cannot open it. The rebels destroy that. And Palpatine actually takes all of the bricks and everything and transports them back to where he is at and has them rebuild it, and then brings Ezra to him because he can't unlock it. I don't know if you remember, but in the first season of Rebels, they encounter a hidden Jedi temple on Lothal. They're hidden. It's actually this is going from Ralph McQuarrie's artwork. Originally, he had created these hive-like structures in concept art that eventually were described as Killik mounds. The Killiks are in the EU and the Old Republic as well, and they look exactly like that. But for Rebels, they repurposed that art to make it a hidden Jedi temple, and it required a master and an apprentice to open the temple using the Force. It's a similar problem that Palpatine has. He can see the temple, but he can't enter it because it's attuned to a Jedi, not a Sith.
That makes sense.
So that's my take on it. We've gone far afield. I don't remember exactly what we're debating anymore.
Okay, so what? Okay, so let's go back to balance because I think we cover redemption. I
Mhm.
think so with balance. Again, when I was preparing for this, I realized I might just be reacting to the Jedi's idea of balance. But I do remember some things Lucas was talking about during the prequel era that I still think he doesn't quite get balance. Now, I take as correct and word of God for the universe that the Sith are like cancer, and your body
Yes.
cannot be in balance if there is a cancer in it. So you have to cut the cancer out.
And that is how George explains it. That's
Right.
correct.
And so I'm not saying balance between Sith and Jedi.
Right.
Nor am I saying you have to be balanced between the light and the dark
Right.
necessarily, because
They are both natural parts of creation and must
Mhm.
exist. The light
Right.
side and the light side and the dark side are different,
hmm
but living and cosmic are required. They
Right.
both have to exist.
hmm So what I'm saying is that, and again, this might be where I'm reacting more to Jedi philosophy than Lucas's vision of what balance actually is. That when you can't have attachments and you can't show love, or no, you so
I would
Anakin
define
does explain you can show love.
right. It's I think that's a pretty convenient explanation, but
He
you know,
he
that's
he'd
how he's
rather
wrapping his head around it.
well, we do have to remember that he's torturing this explanation because he's sitting across the table from a woman in a leather bodice and choker. You will
Well,
say anything.
later, that it's when he's explaining selflessness to Padme, it's while
Uh,
they're on the transport ship going to Naboo undercover.
oh, that's right. Yeah.
So
Still, oh, but if we can say, what kind of a woman wears that to tell a guy we can never be together? That's just cruel. No wonder he ends up evil.
my cynical side would say just about every woman that I could imagine. It's like, no, don't. Yes.
But as I was saying, the Jedi are not balanced people. They're
No,
ascetics or mendicantes or or Buddhists. Well, but Buddhists seek the third way so often. The Buddhists, and this is George being eclectic in his understanding or
he's he's
collection.
he's pulling together lots of different religious concepts and trying to
Yes.
fuse them
hmm
in a way
And
that they weren't really meant to be fused.
right, and so he's not fully Taoist. He described himself and his family as Methodist Buddhists.
I think Taoist is the closest to what the Force is, though.
Yeah, I do too. But okay, and this is another thing. I'm a big fan of John Milius. I've always thought it was interesting that the two of them were close friends, and Milius had years before called himself a Zen anarchist, and he had called himself a right wing extremist, but he'd also called himself a Maoist. And he's a man of these big swings and extremes, and I think George Lucas, as his buddy, borrows some of that.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I think that infusing Western and Eastern ideas, I think he was part of it's because he's using samurai iconography for the Jedi. And I
hmm
think that he wanted something that felt like it was alien enough to a Western audience to be exotic,
hmm
but also dealing with these ideas of self control, which is dealt with in a lot of Eastern disciplines, whether religious or not. I think he was
hmm
exploring the idea of your passions can lead you to do great and terrible things. To become an adult, you have to learn to master those passions and harness them in a way that is healthy and productive.
hmm
because not doing so leads to self-destruction. That's the message he's giving to teenagers. And as a side benefit, because he was a very political person, he also wanted to give a healthy dose of skepticism to teenagers about politicians, which I think is wise. And I think that he was also wise, even though George is a leftist, he didn't code things as this is definitely this political party and this is definitely that political party. Although when he got to the prequels, he sure did hand out Lot Dodd and Newt Gunray and I am the Senate. He got a little more heavy-handed once he got
Yeah.
to the prequels. But initially, he just wanted it to be a fairy tale. And I think that that framing and those concepts allowed him to put all of that together in a blender and have it mostly work.
Yes. Well, and again, this is why you keep it light in the movies, and then the fans can have this sort of discussion where we try to square the circle. It's not serious. You and I know that, and even if we had a big disagreement, we'd still be buddies. But
Yeah,
it's fun.
yeah. I mean, honestly, this is why I think that the universe has endured, or the story has endured, is because what's better than when you're hanging out with a friend having lunch, discussing something that is ultimately trivial, but it's meaningful to you and to
Hmm.
your friend.
Right.
When you can share something like that, it doesn't matter what it is. That's what creates those bonds. And so that's why I enjoy when we get to have these kind of discussions. Um, I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get an hour out of this, and yet I think we could probably go for another hour
We
if we
probably
wanted
could.
to.
Oh, but
Um,
let me get to this that I was saying that so Christianity is as much as it is, we get it through the Anglophone world because we're English speakers. It is itself an Eastern religion, um, at its core.
mhm.
It is from the ancient Near East, but a lot of what you see in the Jedi not just borrows from the Far Eastern religions, but it also borrows from the mendicant orders like the Franciscans.
Mhm.
And so to me, it's funny, but not out of character that the Jedi have fabulous wealth as an organization and yet live as hobos, just like the Franciscans did.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's. I mean, here's another thing to think about because a lot of what we ended up talking about here is all stuff that was invented in the prequels and afterwards.
Hmm.
How did you envision the Jedi before the prequels came out?
So I have, as a thought experiment, created my own prequel, like what to me would have been the universe that actually led up to the universe we see in the original trilogy. And I don't think it's the Jedi at the height of their power, or the I think Owen talks about that wizard, and Obi-Wan talks about following on a fool quest and stuff like that. I think the world of in my mind, the world of the Clone Wars was the Jedi waning in strength and technology rising to the point that even if the Force is real, we don't need it because we can do these things that these people are doing with these spiritual practices of theirs.
Hmm. Okay. See, the prequels were shocking for a lot of reasons besides the midichlorians, and I think one of the biggest shock waves was the Jedi Council because we had no concept of a Jedi Council before that. That had never
Hmm.
been mentioned. I never considered that the Jedi had some kind of central hierarchy. I think I was taking more of a westernized vision rather than an Eastern samurai. They had, sure, they were basically using kendo and they were wearing Eastern combat gis and such.
So you were shocked that they ended up being space Catholics?
No, I had a view of them as actually being more like what Game of Thrones would call a hedge knight. I saw them as wandering knights that were righting wrongs in the countryside. It didn't occur to me that there was
As
a
in, like, you
political.
served my father in the Clone Wars?
Yeah, I didn't see it as having a political hierarchy above them. And
Hmm.
I certainly didn't see them as like agents of the Senate. You know? And so that was a spin that took a long time to actually get used to. And people debated it for a long time because at the time it felt like, well, this is not at all what I thought
Hmm.
this was going to be. But with the passage of time, everything becomes familiar, and eventually you accept it. And now it seems obvious that that's what it was. Um,
Well, in Martin Stone's prequel trilogy, the Jedi are, I think, more like you're talking about. They're not a giant organization. They are people who are adherents to this pantheistic religion, but that religion itself may be officially the state religion, but it's dying, and none of the elites believe it. That's how I would have written it. Also, the Clone Wars would have been like 40, 50 years before, not 20.
well, yeah, I mean, so much got upended by collapsing that time. In a way, and yes, I got to bring this up too. Uh, Space Catholics? Wrong franchise. That's Warhammer 40K. By the way, did you see for April 1st, did you see the Warhammer 40K opera?
No, I didn't see.
Oh, you got to look up that trailer. It's well done. Um I see Sean asking Lorn, Sabine, and Ezra. What are you asking there? I don't know what you're asking.
Well, earlier there was a discussion about their romance cliffhanger. Sean had asked Leslie if he thought, or if she thought, Sabine and Ezra should be together.
Hmm. Are we? I guess
Oh yeah.
are
So Sean has now said, should they or shouldn't they?
are we talking? I guess it depends on what you're talking about. Are we talking in Rebels or are we talking in Ahsoka?
Well, just for the good of the Jedi to perpetuate the force
Well,
sensitive people, they should.
yeah, I strongly disagree with Ahsoka for a number of reasons, not least of which is that I don't buy for a minute that Sabine was intended to ever be force sensitive or become a Jedi. I don't believe for a minute that she had anything resembling a master and apprentice relationship with Ahsoka. That to me is all ridiculous invented fiction that I feel Rebels already sort of directed against. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so offended by Ahsoka. To me, none of the characters in Ahsoka resembled their animated counterparts. They were counterfeits. And that's weird because I thought Rosario Dawson did fine as Ahsoka when she appeared in The Mandalorian. But once she got to her own series, to me, this was a different character. So I cannot really I can't wrap my head around Ahsoka. I've tried and it just doesn't work. I liked the opening of Ahsoka when Baylan Skull and Shin Hati basically wipe out the crew of the New Republic ship to spring Morgan Elsbeth, and after then everything else falls apart for me. So there you go.
Also, I feel like we should make a fake advertisement for Balin Skull Tobacco.
No, okay, so what do you think about Rory McCann taking the place of Ray Stevenson?
I'm okay with it because I don't think when an actor dies, you have to kill off your characters.
Right, I agree. I'm having a hard time slotting Rory McCann in for Ray Stevenson, though. I had heard, I mean, this was probably fan casting, but I kind of liked the idea of Russell Crowe.
Yeah, Russell Crowe would bring the same sort of physicality to it, but that's the thing. You There are certain actors that slot in very easily to replace each other. Um, r- but Stevenson's got maybe three other guys his age that you would pick.
I'm still sick about the fact that he passed. He was such a phenomenal actor. I loved him in Rome. Uh, I loved the fact that they brought I cannot remember the other actor's name. Kevin McKidd, I think is his name. If if you people haven't seen Rome, it was an HBO series, and it followed Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo. And Ray Stevenson was Titus, Kevin McKidd was Lucius. My son's named partially for Lucius in Rome. And in Rebels, they brought both of them back, Kevin McKidd and Ray Stevenson, to play Mandalorians in the Rebels series. And I thought that was inspired casting. It makes me sick inside that Ray's no longer with us. He was just a phenomenal actor, and from everything that I've heard, a really decent gentleman too. So,
it was a different Lucius, but I almost got my wife to agree to Lucius Quinctus Cincinnatus Stone.
There you go. I get it. I'll tell you a little bit of Lorn lore before we get out of here for tonight. My ex was a massive Harry Potter fan. I was a major Star Wars fan. When she was pregnant, we were discussing boys' names and girls' names and all of this stuff. And there is a tradition in my family that for the last, there was my grandfather, my father, and me. We all share the same initials, LMC. And so I had told my ex about this, and we had agreed that whatever names we came up with, they would adhere to that tradition. But we could not agree on names at all. And we were out to dinner or lunch one day with my parents. And I think it was my dad suggested, since she was a Harry Potter fan, Lucius Malfoy Connor. And she said, absolutely not. She would not name him Lucius Malfoy. And I thought it was funny. But I had two other Luciuses that I liked. There was Lucius Vorenus from Rome, and there was Lucius Fox from Batman. And so I liked the idea of Lucius.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pitched to her Lucius Marcus from Indiana Jones. And I said, if you don't like Lucius, we can shorten it to Luke. And so she gave it to me. So that's how my son got his name.
My other son was also almost Marcus Furious Camillus Stone, but he's Marty Jr.
I like it. I have a feeling that name, though, would have caused him either to be the subject of bullying or becoming a bully.
One road sometimes leads to the other.
I suppose that's also true. Folks, we do have to get out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. I know we've been doing a lot of deep dives on Star Wars lately, so we'll probably give that a rest for a while. I'm glad that you guys hung in here with us. I hope it wasn't too tedious for you. But if you enjoyed it, let us know. If you'd like more content like this, let us know. If you got some topics you want us to cover in more long-form conversations like this, let us know. We're always looking for good show ideas. In the meantime, hope you guys all have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Until then, take care.
The bell rings every morning. It's off to school and work. Waiting for some fun while my boss acts like a jerk. Pro show afternoons. Midnight sketch can't come too soon. The afternoon sketch can't come too soon. But at night I'm filled with dread. I know just what I'll do instead. Come on and follow me. It's time you see for Lorn and Apollo. Time to laugh and learn. Come feel the burn of what the fandom was. What random fun doesn't escape? Isn't it great? Late night with Lorn and Apollo.